Hello and welcome to West Virginia Press InSight, a production of the West Virginia newspaper industry. I'm Tom Hunter.
And I'm Betsy DeBord. Like you, we're interested in issues impacting West Virginia.
West Virginia Press InSight focuses on policy and impact, not politics or personalities.
Today we're looking at the following issues: teacher pay raises and the statewide work stoppage, key legislation in the final weeks of the legislative session, plans for the intermediate court, Supreme Court budget, the continuing drug abuse problem in West Virginia, and WVUToday outlines a dream job for most West Virginians, an engineer student's campus work filming WVU athletics, and tourism in the Mid-Ohio Valley.
And on In Depth with Don Smith, AARP State Director Gaylene Miller discusses legislation that would impact West Virginians 50 plus and their families.
West Virginia teachers are out of the classroom and on the picket lines, and it's not clear when that's going to change. The Senate and House of Delegates approved a pay raise plan last week, and Governor Jim Justice signed legislation into law the next day. It gives teachers, school service personnel, and state police a 2% pay increase starting in July, and has taken the steps in the budget to include a 2% pay raise for all other state employees effective July 1st as well. Teachers are also scheduled to get an additional 1% hike in each of the following 2 years, fiscal year 2020 and 2021, while school service personnel and state police will get an additional 1% in fiscal year 2020. The governor signed the bill on the eve of a planned work stoppage action by teachers and school service personnel on February 22nd and 23rd. With the legislation through both houses and signed by the governor, the line is drawn in the sand. Governor Justice said that members of the West Virginia legislature did the responsible thing to help our teachers and state employees by passing the pay raise package on Tuesday. We need to keep our kids and teachers in the classroom. We certainly recognize our teachers are underpaid, and this is a step in the right direction to addressing their pay issue. Now we need to turn our focus back to continuing public education reforms and making our state educational system the best in the country, the governor said. Prior to gaining approval, debate over teacher pay caused some hard feelings on the floor of the House of Delegates. Delegates debated the Senate's proposal, which cut a third 1% increase from the proposal that had earlier passed the House 99-1. Democrats said 2% with the potential for another 1% of the next 2 years wasn't good enough. Republicans countered that it was the best the state could do now, but they want to do more when the economy and state budget improve.
And Betsy, this certainly has been the most contentious year for relations between legislators and teachers in the state since 1990, when a statewide walkout led to a series of pay raises.
Several Republican lawmakers have said the union bosses are getting people stirred up over issues unrelated to pay, such as how dues are collected.
Now, the debate over finding more funds for teachers has reached into other legislation. Some legislators are questioning the wisdom of eliminating the industrial personal property tax. Others are calling for increases in the state's severance taxes on natural gas or use of the state's rainy day fund to provide revenue for teachers' pay raises. With less than 2 weeks remaining in this year's legislative session, a number of key issues still need to be decided. Rusty Marks and Jake Jarvis report in the State Journal that the leadership is pleased with how things have gone so far. Senate President Mitch Carmichael cited Senate Bill 284, which provides free community and technical college tuition, as a major accomplishment for his chamber. The House of Delegates has yet to deal with that legislation, although the bill seems popular across party lines. Carmichael also continues to hope the legislature, with Senate Joint Resolution 9, will be able to eliminate the business property tax on inventory, machinery, and equipment. Proponents of its removal call it one of the biggest job-killing taxes in the state, while opponents say the business community has received enough tax relief recently and another reduction isn't warranted. Because the tax is in the West Virginia Constitution, eliminating it actually would require voters to approve a constitutional amendment, and it would take a 2/3 vote of both the House and the Senate to place that measure on the statewide ballot. House Minority Leader Tim Miley says Democrats aren't sold on the proposal, and if they stick together, it wouldn't be able to get the number of votes required to let voters decide.
And you know, Tom, there are a lot of issues still to be decided in the final couple weeks, as is often the case. Those final hours always seem to have a few interesting items for people to watch.
Yeah, Betsy, we've talked during the show about several of the major items that will take center stage as the legislative session winds down to its conclusion. That, of course, includes the teacher pay raise and PEIA changes, but also topics such as logging in state parks, a number of energy-related bills, whether to allow sports betting in the state, a pair of abortion measures, and the idea of making people work before they receive food stamp assistance.
We're also now getting into the time in the session when some of the more complex rules come into play. For example, bills had to be out of committee by this past Sunday to be considered, and February 28th is the last day for bills to pass either the House or Senate to remain alive in this session. The other chamber can take action after that.
Yeah, and Betsy, another concept you may hear more about it a little bit here in these closing days is suspending the rules. Traditionally, bills must be read on 3 separate days with official passage or rejection taking place on the 3rd day. Now, 4/5 of the legislative body agrees, however, all 3 readings can take place on the same day.
And leadership can also place proposals on the inactive calendar, which means the bill isn't scheduled to be considered. Of course, they can put it back on the active calendar too.
As of last week, 19 bills had been passed by both the Senate and the House. Some major changes may be coming to West Virginia's judicial system, and one change has already taken place at the state Supreme Court. The Charleston Gazette-Mail's Jake Zuckerman reports that the West Virginia Senate has passed a pair of proposals that will now go on to the House of Delegates for further consideration. The first, which passed along party lines with Republican support, would create an intermediate court of appeals that would establish a new level of judges and support staff to consider civil cases only. Criminal appeals still would go directly to the West Virginia Supreme Court, where intermediate court rulings also could be appealed. In addition, the West Virginia Senate unanimously passed a resolution that will ask voters to approve putting the court's budget under the oversight of the legislature. Currently, the court's budget must be allocated as justices request. A constitutional amendment is necessary to change the way the budget is handled. The Intermediate Court of Appeals has been a long-time priority for the state's business community, although the current Supreme Court says it isn't needed. Justices say it would cost more than $10 million a year, but senators who support the new body say those costs are inflated. The current Supreme Court also made news this month. Justice Margaret Workman was voted as Chief Justice, although Justice Alan Lawfrey had 3 years left in his term as the Chief.
And the new intermediate court, if approved by the House of Delegates, would hear certain appeals from circuit courts across the state. Civil cases, workers' compensation claims, abuse and neglect cases, and some other administrative appeals would be subject to the new court.
And Betsy, the West Virginia Supreme Court now hears all appeals, but it doesn't actually issue full opinions on them. Many are just short memoranda, something that the U.S. Chamber of Commerce's Institute for Legal Reform doesn't like.
Democrats who voted against the proposal say it's not necessary and that the money could be better spent in a number of ways, including state employee and teacher pay raises.
If created, the Intermediate Court would be broken into northern and southern districts, each with a panel of 3 judges who would be appointed by the governor.
On the budget issue, the court's spending has come under intense scrutiny this year after reports showed hundreds of thousands of dollars spent on remodeling offices. One of the items that got lawmakers fired up was a $32,000 couch in Justice Lawfrey's office. Newspapers across the state continue to write about ways West Virginia is trying to combat the drug epidemic, which has significant costs in both terms of dollars and lives. Dr. Michael Brummage, director of the state's new Office of Drug Control Policy, talked to Wendy Holdren for a story in the Register-Herald of Beckley. Dr. Brummage says he thinks it's important to discuss how adverse childhood experiences play a role in drug abuse. He says he thinks the response plan recently adopted by the Department of Health and Human Resources is well done and a good start that he looks forward to working with. Across the state, Jim McConville reports in the Journal of Martinsburg that a new study puts the financial impact of opioid addiction in West Virginia at $8.8 billion. That's the highest per capita amount in the country, according to the American Enterprise Institute, which recently released a study earlier this month. That comes out to nearly $4,800 per resident. Dr. Rahul Gupta, the state's public health officer, says the economic impact has been significantly underestimated over the years. The opioid epidemic also took center stage last week during a Festival Ideas session sponsored by the Charleston Gazette-Mail and West Virginia University. Experts on the panel there said it could take decades to overcome the stigma associated with drug abuse, although bringing the issue out in the open certainly helps. Also on the panel was Pulitzer Prize-winning reporter Eric Ayre, who said legislators continue to look for ways to stop the epidemic. Despite the efforts of so many in the state, however, Ayre said the problem keeps getting worse.
And Betsy, of course, those figures on the financial impact are staggering, but they fail to quantify the personal toll that this epidemic has taken on so many families across the Mountain State. While some of the efforts focus on figuring out how we got here, others are centered on figuring out how we get out of it.
And for those who haven't seen it, the Heroin documentary done by WVU graduate Elaine McMillian Sheldon is a great look at how illegal drugs affect the city of Huntington. Users, family members, and emergency responders talk about how they cope in the movie, which has received an Oscar nomination.
And different communities in the state face unique challenges as well. In the Eastern Panhandle in Berkeley County, for example, the Recovery Resource Center helped 240 individuals in the first 6 weeks of this year. It's compared to an average of 137 people a month the center helped in 2017.
More and more emergency responders are also carrying naloxone, an opioid antagonist that can help people who have overdosed on heroin or a similar drug. Many of those fighting the state's drug problems agree it's important to have positive stories heard, so others struggling with addiction have hope.
There's probably no proposed environmental legislation causing more debate than the West Virginia Department of Natural Resources plan for logging in our state parks. Senate Bill 270 was initially introduced to allow limited logging in all state parks at the request of Governor Jim Justice. After pushback from opponents, a new committee version of the bill will permit timbering only at Watauga State Park. The pilot program at the 10,000-acre state park in Pocahontas County will limit logging to 4 trees per acre. Editorial writers at newspapers across the state are touting both the benefits and the pitfalls of the bill, which would authorize the DNR to sell the timber to pay for maintenance work. A Charleston Daily Mail editorial says timbering can be done responsibly, and we need the money to keep the state parks in decent shape, not just financial shape, but forest shape. Letting forest lands go 80 years with no cutting does not necessarily promote forest health, according to the Daily Mail's editorial. Not so, according to editorials in the Huntington Herald-Dispatch and the Parkersburg News and Sentinel. Both say officials should do nothing that might make parks less attractive to visitors who pump tens of millions of dollars a year into the state's economy.
And getting rid of the 87-year-old ban on timbering in state parks has elicited plenty of criticism, especially from conservation groups who say there are 12 million acres of timberland in West Virginia, almost all of which is available for timber production. There is, they say, no need to cut down trees in our state parks. Proponents say the bill would lift a ban on state park timbering implemented in 1931 and would improve forest health and recreational activities in the park.
In Betsy, the bill limits logging to 4 trees per acre, as we mentioned, which at a maximum would be 40,000 trees down in Watauga State Park. There's a total of 81,000 acres of forest in West Virginia state parks.
West Virginia students may be able to go to community and technical colleges tuition-free. Senate Bill 284 passed unanimously in the Senate and is now in the House for consideration. There are several considerations for a free education, including a drug test. Students have to take and pass a drug test before every semester. They must stay in West Virginia 2 years after graduation. If they choose to leave before the 2 years, they have to pay back the money from the West Virginia Invest Grant. Students must maintain a 2.0 grade point average and take at least 6 credit hours per semester. Senate Education Committee Vice Chairman Robert Carnes, a Republican from Upshur County, said we made sure we put in appropriate safeguards to help control the costs, as well as to tailor the program in a way that really focused on moving kids in West Virginia to the workforce in West Virginia. The estimated cost of taxpayers is $8 million per year. However, the bill will also allow students to attend private, regionally accredited 2-year colleges. For-profit colleges charge up to $30,000 per year for their programs, which would up costs considerably. Right now, there are no accredited private schools eligible for the grants in West Virginia. An editorial in the Dominion Post applauds the measure, saying West Virginia has the nation's lowest workforce participation rate and the best jobs plan is an education plan. The editorial goes on to say it's about giving young people hope for their future while helping to advance our state's economy in a different direction.
And Betsy, there was no opposition to this bill in the Senate, although 4-year institutions requested the bill include all colleges and universities in the state.
And one fear is that the free tuition at 2-year schools will drain their attendance rolls at 4-year institutions.
The West Virginia University students who volunteer to videotape university events are usually trained at the Reed College of Media. But one mechanical and aerospace engineering student found he had a knack for videography after volunteering to videotape sports events with friends. In our WVUToday segment, we meet Trevor Groman from the Statler College of Engineering, who works alongside professionals to bring you WVU's football games.
My favorite part for filming with athletics is it's very freeing for me. I don't know if that's the right word, but that's the word I'm going to go with. It's very relaxing. Some say it's mindless. I don't think it is, but it's my sort of meditation. It's my escape from studies as they are, but it's a great way to bring myself back down because it's just one simple focused task that lets me keep my mind clear. So one of my friends, freshman year, his roommate was in the J school, and he told me he did a lot of filming for the athletics department. And I said, that sounds pretty cool. I like sports, I like watching sports. Never worked a camera before. It's always seemed interesting to do, but it's never something I've done. And so he said, go ahead and join us. So fall semester, my sophomore year, I came up, filmed a couple soccer games, and I've loved it ever since. I've been filming every sport I get the chance to.
Gorman really is more interested in NASA than ESPN. After graduation, he hopes to use his education and love for filming to lead a research design team for interplanetary travel to learn more about our solar system and the universe. Up next on InSight, Don Smith speaks with Gaylene Miller of AARP.
I'm Don Smith, and today we welcome Gaylene Miller, State Director for AARP West Virginia. We're going to discuss issues impacting West Virginians 50 plus and their families. Gaylene, welcome. Glad to have you.
Thanks, Don. Good to be here.
Gaylene, AARP is a real presence at the Capitol and typically working for bills that will support families and West Virginians 55 and older, 50 and older. What are the key issues you're looking at this year? What are some of the legislation that you're monitoring as you get down to the last 2 weeks of this session?
Sure. So we work on basically 3 buckets. Supporting family caregivers is one of those buckets. Home and community-based services is a second bucket, and our third bucket is around livable communities. So under the supporting family caregivers, this year we're supporting a piece of legislation that would create a council for palliative care. In West Virginia, we have over 300,000 family caregivers, and they're providing an estimated $2.8 billion worth of uncompensated care. That's billion with a B.
That's an incredible number, and I've been fortunate enough to hear your presentations a couple of times at the Capitol. And well, that number is big, but I think one of the key things is you make it clear that for West Virginians, being at home is a big factor.
Oh, we did a survey, I believe it was 2 years ago, and we knew the number would be high, but it was 98% of West Virginians want to remain in their homes and communities. And not only is that the preferred place to be, it's actually the least expensive place to be.
And that's an important thing in West Virginia, both for the state and for the residents and for the people. That care it gets to be so expensive, such a burden to families.
It's a labor of love, though, Don. It really is. And again, I think when you look at family caregiving, everyone has a story.
Oh, absolutely.
You know, and you've either been a caregiver, you know, you're currently a caregiver, you anticipate being a caregiver, or you're going to need a caregiver. So it's one of those issues that really reaches across the aisles. It's not a Republican issue. It's not a Democratic issue. It's a family issue, and it's a West Virginia issue.
Well, I know in my family for generations, at some point, the grandparent was in the house with us. Mm-hmm. At the end of the grandparent's life, they were in the house where they felt more secure. They knew the surroundings, and we were able to make sure that they had care. And the same is true with my wife, Samantha. Her family has a history of that. And I think, like you said, most West Virginian families have something of that, a story like that. So what bill are we looking at, and where is it in the process?
So the bill we're looking at is a House bill, and I'm happy to report that it's passed the House, so it's in the Senate now. And we're working with the American Cancer Society, the Cancer Action Network, again, to create this palliative care council. Number one, to increase awareness of what palliative care is, and number two, to increase the utilization of palliative care. We started working with the Cancer Society probably in the summer, so 6-8 months ago. Mm-hmm. And at that time, I was using the terms palliative care and hospice care interchangeably. Okay. I learned that there's a distinction between the two, and it's an important distinction. Palliative care can be prescribed at the initial diagnosis, so you don't have to wait until there's that death is within 6 months or right. Some sort of prognostication like that. So the other thing that's important about palliative care is it can be done along with curative treatment, which is different than hospice. And so again, it can do some things that will help the patient and the family caregiver have a better quality of life.
Okay. What can we go into a little bit more detail about what exactly if this would pass, what it would mean to the families? What would they, in terms of the, is it financial support? Is it recognition? How's the bill work?
Yeah, so the whole idea of the council is to figure that out.
Oh, okay,
Dawn.
so this is still...
So it's going to be providers, it's going to be consumers, it's going to have family caregivers on there. Again, to kind of create a plan for the legislature to look at and implement to support family caregivers in accessing and utilizing palliative care.
Well, I know there have been some discussions at the session this time that there haven't been, on some bills, there hasn't been enough stakeholder meetings, there haven't been enough people involved. So it's great to hear that that's where we are on this bill.
Yeah, and again, we're working directly with the Cancer Action Network, but folks like the Alzheimer's Association are on board, the Hospital Council is on board, the Center for End of Life Care is on board. So there's a large group, and particularly physicians are supporting this bill. They're one of the key sponsors on the House legislation, again, which is now in the Senate, and it goes to the Senate Health Committee, which is chaired by a physician who is supportive of the concept as well.
Well, I know that, in full disclosure, the Press Association is a corporate partner with AARP West Virginia, and we found out years ago that there was a great overlap and a good partnership, and it was good to get input from everybody on these type of things. And I know we enjoy working with you, and I'm sure the other groups, the American Cancer Society, we work with also. So I'm sure that by getting more people to the table, you get a better feel for the situation and better answers.
It's always important to get different perspectives on a particular issue.
Very good. So we're supporting family caregivers. What about the community efforts you're doing? Anything moving in that?
So that's really a budget issue, and so going into the last 2 weeks of the session, they're going to start focusing more on the budget, I believe. Of course, they have some other challenges, as we know. But so there's a couple or three programs right now that support family caregivers to keep people in their homes and communities. One is called the FAIR program, which stands for Family Alzheimer's In-Home Respite Care. That's a state-funded program, along with Lighthouse, which provides those in-home services, again, supporting the family caregiver and keeping people at home where they want to be. And that's for folks who don't necessarily qualify for Medicaid. They might be a few dollars over that eligibility criteria, but they still need the support and the services. It's a sliding fee scale, again, a state-funded program. So those two are really important. The third is the Medicaid Aged and Disabled Waiver Program. That's for folks who would qualify both financially and medically for nursing home care, but choose to remain at home. And it's much less costly to keep people at home than in institutions like nursing homes. I think the statistics I've seen show that nursing home care in West Virginia costs around $44,000 a year.
Now, how's that compare?
Home and community-based services, and particularly the aged and disabled waiver, is around $16,000 a year.
Wow. That's, I know that you refer to the term pocketbook issues.
Right.
Certainly we all watch the state budget and what money's available for state programs, but your group, perhaps more than most, looks at what that will do to the people around the state. So many of your members are at a time in their life where their income is fixed or limited, so even a small change can have a big impact on your membership. One of the bills that I've seen come up just recently and kind of surprised me is Senate Bill 600, which deals with manufacturing, electric use, rates, and we've been trying to monitor that, but we're a little concerned that while it seems like a great idea to help the manufacturing and energy segment, it could have an impact on local residents that's maybe not being discussed. Have you guys looked at that at all yet?
We have, Don. That popped up on our radar earlier this week. And again, I think you're right. It is well-intentioned. As a native West Virginia, I want to see our state thrive and prosper. And so this bill is designed to, intended to bring in recruit new manufacturers and industrials to the state, as well as retaining the existing base that we have. So again, well-intentioned. The problem is, I think it could have some unintended consequences, as you mentioned. And that is, if they provide these special rates, a discount, if you will, to these industrials and manufacturers, the utility is still going to collect the full amount. And that means that will get shifted to other ratepayers, in particular residential, commercial users, small businesses, and even other industrials that aren't getting the special discounted rate.
Yeah, as we read it, they can pass on that difference to other classes of customers, which could be local residents.
Absolutely. We know the last time there was a rate increase in front of the Public Service Commission, these industrials took about a 2% increase. Residential customers got an 11% increase.
Now, Gaylene, as far as I'm aware, the media was not made aware this bill was coming, and there wasn't a lot put out to the public through us about what this bill would entail and who it could impact. Was AARP West Virginia included in this?
We were not, nor was the consumer advocate for the Public Service Commission, so no residential ratepayer perspective went into the drafting or review of this bill, unfortunately, and I think that's an important perspective that has been missed.
Well, hopefully they'll circle back and give everybody a chance to comment and express a viewpoint. I want to talk a little bit about AARP as an organization in West Virginia and at the Capitol, but I want to see, is there any other piece of legislation that I haven't brought up that you want to talk about before I move into that area?
No, I think we've covered it, and I'm excited to talk about our team that's at the Capitol.
For those of you that don't know, AARP has a presence at the Capitol that can't be missed or denied. In my time here in the last 5 years watching it, I've seen no group that has a greater presence at the Capitol, and probably no group more respected for their opinions and their positions. Everything seems well thought out. Everything seems documented and factual. And the presence of really great volunteers from around the state give you guys such a presence at all committee meetings and on all legislation. And I think you're called in as a stakeholder a lot when you should be. And that takes a lot of work. How does this all work out for you? How did AARP grow to this level?
Well, AARP has always been a volunteer organization. First, let me say that. And in West Virginia, we're fortunate to have volunteers who have a passion and a commitment to making our state better. You know, they have experience, they have talent, and they've chosen to spend time with AARP, which is really phenomenal for us.
And they are volunteers, correct?
They're volunteers. Of course, we do reimburse them for their travel costs. We accommodate if they need overnight lodging and meals and those sorts of things, but they don't get paid. So it really is something that they truly believe in and want to be a part of. And there's nothing more powerful, really, Dawn, as you know, than a constituent talking to a member of the legislature, to their lawmaker, to their friend, their neighbor. And so we think that we provide them with all the tools and training that these volunteers need to be successful, and they deliver.
Yeah. Well, one of the reasons that I saw a good partnership with AARP West Virginia is that we have papers in every county in the state, the Press Association, and you have members all over the state. So we're able to give the legislature a viewpoint from any region at any time. And I think that's a key part of being successful at the Capitol and in developing good legislation.
And you know, Don, we're always looking for more members for our team. So if any of the viewers are interested in becoming an AARP volunteer, they can send an email to aarpwv@aarp.org.
All right, great. Well, Gaylene, thank you very much for your time today. I appreciate having you.
Thanks, Don. Good to be here.
Next on InSight, Betsy DeBord looks at tourism in West Virginia's Mid-Ohio Valley.
If you'd like to get away for a long weekend, you don't have to head out of state. West Virginia is full of tourist destinations that attract visitors from all over the world. One of the state's favorite destinations is Parkersburg, which is the center of the Mid-Ohio Valley region. It's home to the world-famous state parks, extensive hiking and biking trails, and nationally recognized museums. Blennerhassett Island Historical Park brings in over 40,000 visitors every year. A stern-wheeler riverboat transports you back in time to the island and historic Blennerhassett Mansion. If you prefer hiking, biking, or canoeing, head over to the North Bend Rail Trail. It's 72 miles long and leads through wooded backcountry, tunnels, and charming small towns. If it's culture you're after, Parkersburg is home to the nationally recognized Oil and Gas Museum. It features exhibits on West Virginia's statehood, the Civil War, and the oil and gas industry. West Virginia is full of wonderful tourist attractions. You can find them under the Places to Go section on the Office of Tourism's website. Go to WV.com.
The Oil and Gas Museum is an attempt to show the importance of oil and the growth of Parkersburg, especially in the 1860s when oil began coming down the Little Canal River from the Burning Springs area.
Oil and Gas Museum also owns and maintains Henderson Hall. What makes it such a historical treasure is we have 200 years of history of one family inside the walls of this big old house.
We run the 1.5 miles between Parkersburg and Blennerhassett Island.
You're always welcome to go explore the island. There's a lot of history on the island and the river in general.
This is like teaching. You get to talk to people all day about history. And once you put on this costume, you are someone else.
North Bend's phenomenal. Every time I go there, it takes my breath away. The beauty, the hiking, the mountain biking, but the kayaking on that lake is unbelievable.
The biological diversity of the Ohio River is very impressive.
Wildlife here is second to none.
Downtown has a lot of things to offer. There's theater downtown, the Smoot, as well as the Actors Guild. Our art center is a really fantastic spot to visit.
The Art Center is a nonprofit organization that's been around since 1938. You can come here and make art, you can appreciate art, you can purchase art, you can be involved in the process.
This is not a cookie cutter hotel. You can have a great meal in Spats, which is our on-property restaurant, and we have a fantastic wine list, about 500 different labels to choose from. An experience for any traveler.
This is more of a Norman Rockwell type culture.
It really is a step back in time, takes you to a different era, a different feel, and yet it feels like home at the same time.
It is an adventure, and the people you meet are just amazing.